All right, so get ready, because we're diving deep into a story that's shaking up the fantasy literature world.
Yeah, it's
Big time.
a big one for sure. And
We're talking Neil Gaiman,
Neil Gaiman,
the author behind, American Gods, Sandman, Coraline.
hugely popular.
Yeah, works that have just captured the imaginations of so many people. Blending that myth in modern life, but recently, Gaiman's own life has gotten pretty complicated, with some serious allegations that are being made.
Yeah, and they're really putting a question mark on his legacy. Like
Yeah,
it's really
it's tough.
it's tough, and it's interesting because
Yeah.
we're used to Gaiman crafting these stories where the lines between fantasy and reality are kind of blurred.
Yeah.
But here, it's his own reality that's become like a plot twist,
Yeah, it's
almost like something out of one of his novels.
It's wild. And what we're going to be looking at today, to really get into this, are a bunch of YouTube videos that are examining these allegations, and they're coming at it from all different sides.
That's what I find so fascinating about these videos, is that we get to hear from fans and critics and legal experts who are all trying to figure this out.
Yeah. And it's important to say right off the bat that we're not here to decide if Gaiman's guilty or innocent.
Right.
We're not going to pronounce any verdict on that.
Definitely not.
We're just here to take a look at the information.
Yeah, a nuanced look.
A nuanced look at it, exploring what the accusations are, how Gaiman's responded, and what's happening in the real world because of this.
Exactly. And to kind of set the stage, what are we dealing with here? Like, what are the actual accusations being made?
Okay, so at the core of this whole thing are allegations of sexual abuse and misconduct that have been brought forward by multiple women.
Right.
And in a lot of these stories, there are common threads.
Yeah, like a pattern.
A pattern of behavior that suggests grooming, manipulation, and coercion.
And often targeting, it seems, young fans.
Young fans, yeah, who might have been especially vulnerable to someone in Gaiman's position of power and authority.
Right, exactly.
So when we talk about specific accusations, there's one that kind of jumps out, and that is the case of Scarlett Pavlovich.
Pavlovich, yeah, she's a central figure in all of this.
She was working as a nanny for Gaiman and his then wife,
Amanda Palmer.
Amanda Palmer. Yes. And she's gone and filed lawsuits in multiple states. We're talking Wisconsin, New York, Massachusetts.
Yeah, that's pretty significant.
Yeah, and her claims are really serious.
Very serious. She's alleging rape by Gaiman.
Right.
But it goes even further than that. The lawsuits also accuse him of human trafficking and even implicate Amanda Palmer in this whole thing.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a lot.
So those are incredibly serious allegations with huge potential legal consequence. And filing in multiple states seems like a pretty strategic move. I mean,
Oh, absolutely, it is. It broadens the reach, so to speak, increases the pressure on Gaiman and Palmer.
Yeah.
It's like casting a wider net, making it much harder to fight back.
And it's not just Pavlovich. Our sources point to several other women who have shared their stories, and it's disturbing how similar the patterns of behavior are.
Yeah, and it's important to remember that these allegations, similar allegations, have been around for a while now. There was the article by Leela Shapiro in New York Magazine and that podcast series, the one called Master. The allegations against Neil Gaiman by Tortoise Media, they really dig into all of this. They paint a picture of Gaiman possibly using his fame and his status to take advantage of women, a lot of them fans.
Yeah, and that just makes you think about, the power dynamics at play here.
Absolutely.
You've got someone who idolizes a famous author. Maybe they're less likely to question things or to say no.
Yeah, they might not feel comfortable saying no.
Right. And it creates this environment where consent gets really blurry.
Exactly. And we see this pattern popping up again and again, right? You've got Kay, who says she had a relationship with Gaiman starting when she was 20. He was in his mid-40s.
Right.
And then there's Claire, who says Gaiman put $60,000 into her bank account after she confronted him about an encounter that she describes as really traumatic.
Okay, so both of those situations really raise those concerns about a potential power imbalance.
Right. It's not just isolated incidents. It's starting to look like a pattern of behavior, a systemic thing where Gaiman might have used his position for his own advantage. And that detail about the money,
Yeah.
that's really troubling if it's true.
Yeah, it is.
It makes you think about hush money, things we've seen in other cases.
Right. And speaking of silencing tactics, there are accusations that Gaiman's used NDAs, those non-disclosure agreements, and financial settlements to keep other accusers quiet.
Right.
And, it is worth noting that NDAs are pretty common in legal settlements.
Yeah.
Doesn't necessarily mean guilt.
Right.
They can be there to protect everyone's privacy. But in a case like this, you do kind of wonder, if those agreements were really entered into freely, or if they might have been used to bury information that could damage Gaiman's reputation.
Yeah, it's a good point. Definitely something to consider. And then there's that allegation about Caroline Wallner.
Right.
She apparently got $60,000 from Gaiman for signing an NDA, and it raises those ethical questions about money being used to silence accusers. And again, it's important to remember that these are allegations. They haven't been proven in court.
Right.
But it does create a really unsettling context, especially when you consider all the other accusations about money and the power dynamic about.
Right. It's complicated, right?
Very complicated.
A lot of accusations that are tough to sort out. But even if some of these allegations end up being false, just the sheer number of them, the consistency, the potential financial settlements, the NDAs, it's hard to just ignore.
Right, right.
And the fact that these accusations have been kind of floating around for a while before becoming public just adds another layer to all of this.
Mm-hmm.
So where does this leave Amanda Palmer? She and Gaiman were separated at the time of these alleged incidents, right?
Right.
And they're in the middle of a divorce. But Pavlovich's lawsuit doesn't let Palmer off the hook at all.
No, it doesn't. It claims she was complicit in what Gaiman was doing.
Wow. And the lawsuit doesn't just accuse her of knowing about it and not saying anything to Pavlovich.
Right.
It actually uses terms like procuring and presenting.
Yeah, which suggests that she may have actively played a role in making Pavlovich vulnerable.
I'm no legal expert or anything, but those terms sound really serious.
They are. Basically, procuring implies that she was actively getting or securing someone for some illicit purpose.
Okay.
And presenting implies that she made someone available or offered them up to Gaiman.
Wow, so the lawsuit is basically saying that Palmer wasn't just standing by, but was an active participant.
Yeah, that's the argument they're making.
That changes how we see Palmer's potential involvement.
It does.
It's not just looking the other way, but actively helping to make these alleged encounters happen.
Right.
And considering she was married to Gaiman at the time, this adds a whole other layer of betrayal.
Absolutely.
And, it makes you think about the dynamics of their relationship, like what was really going on there.
Yeah, it's a lot to unpack.
So before we get into the fallout from all of this and how Gaiman's responded, I think it's important to pause and think about what this case reveals about fandom and how the power dynamic between an artist and their fans can be so unbalanced.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what we're seeing here is a pretty stark example of how fandom, which is often a really good thing,
Right.
can also create a situation where boundaries get blurred and people might feel pressured to do what someone they admire wants them to do.
Right.
It's a reminder that even in places like fandom, we need to be aware of these power imbalances, and we all have to work to make sure that everything's consensual and respectful.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so we've laid out the main accusations, started talking about the legal and ethical stuff. But how has Gaiman responded to all this?
He put out a denial on his blog back in January.
Okay.
Totally denying any abuse or non-consensual acts. But professionally, things are already kind of falling apart for him. He's lost both his U.S. and U.K. agents.
Wow.
Which is a big deal in publishing.
Yeah.
That's a major blow.
Yeah, and it seems like consequences are coming at him from every direction.
Yeah.
We're going to dive deeper into all of that in the next part of this deep dive.
Yeah.
But for now, I think it's just important to acknowledge that these accusations are very serious.
Mm-hmm.
And no matter what the legal outcome is,
Right.
this could have a lasting impact on his legacy.
Exactly. It really highlights how powerful accusations are in the #MeToo era and how quickly reputations can be tarnished, even for someone like Gaiman.
Yeah.
And that's just one of the many things we're going to explore as we keep going with this story.
Absolutely. So we've talked about how serious these accusations against Gaiman are and how they're already impacting the publishing world. But one thing that's really interesting to me is how the media's been handling this whole thing.
It's tricky, right?
Yeah.
Because on the one hand, they've got to report on these serious allegations, especially when it involves a public figure like Gaiman.
Right.
But on the other hand, they've got to be really careful, avoid saying anything that could be considered libel.
Right.
So it seems like a lot of the mainstream outlets were really hesitant at first.
Yeah. And actually, one of the videos we watched called it a media blackout.
Really?
Yeah, suggesting that most of the big outlets didn't even acknowledge the accusations until Gaiman came out with his denial.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's like they were giving him the benefit of the doubt,
Yeah, or maybe they were worried about legal trouble.
Right.
It makes you think about how power dynamics can shape what gets reported and when, Gaiman's got a huge following, a team of lawyers, a lot of influence in the industry.
Yeah.
So it's understandable that some outlets might not want to risk damaging his reputation without hearing from him first.
Right, but then you have outlets like New York Magazine and Tortoise Media who did things differently.
Yeah, they did their own investigations,
Yeah.
published articles and podcasts that really got into the details of the accusations.
Yeah, it's like they decided this story needed to be told no matter what.
Yeah.
No matter Gaiman's status or any potential legal threats.
And Tortoise Media especially got a lot of pushback from Gaiman's lawyers.
Oh, really?
Yeah, one of the YouTube videos mentioned that they actually threatened Tortoise Media with legal action if they published anything about the allegations.
Well, even before they'd published anything.
Yeah, apparently even before a word was written.
That seems pretty aggressive.
It does, doesn't it? And it went beyond just vague threats. They made specific demands.
Like what?
Like forbidding them from quoting letters or text messages, revealing their sources, or even talking about how they were reporting the story.
That's concerning.
It's like he was trying to control the narrative before it even started.
Yeah.
And it's not just about controlling the story. These kinds of threats can really shut down investigative journalism, especially for smaller, independent outlets.
Right. If they know they might end up in a big legal battle.
Yeah.
They might be less likely to investigate touchy subjects.
Exactly. Especially when powerful people are involved.
Right. So it's bigger than just this one case.
Exactly.
It's about potentially silencing and preventing important stories from coming out.
Right. And it's important to remember that this isn't an isolated thing.
Right.
We've seen this tactic used in other big cases. People with a lot of money using legal threats to intimidate journalists and keep things quiet.
So those power dynamics go beyond just the allegations themselves.
Absolutely.
They also impact how those allegations are reported, investigated, and how the public sees them.
Exactly. It really underscores how important it is to have different kinds of media outlet, like independent places like Tortoise Media, who are willing to take risks and hold powerful people accountable.
Right, even when they're facing that legal pressure.
Exactly.
And then you've got YouTube and social media, where independent creators are offering their own perspectives.
It's really fascinating.
Yeah, it's amazing to see how this story has sparked all this debate among fans, critics, legal experts.
It really shows the power of citizen journalism.
Yeah.
And how online platforms can give a voice to different perspectives and in-depth analysis that you might not find in traditional media.
Right. And these YouTube videos aren't just repeating the same information. Some of them go into fascinating details, like the legal strategies at play.
Oh, yeah, that's key. There was one video that broke down Pavlovich's decision to sue in multiple states.
Right.
And explain how that could be advantageous.
Yeah, it talked about how each state has its own laws about sexual assault cases.
Right.
And how by filing in multiple states, her legal team's basically increasing their chances of winning.
Yeah, and putting more pressure on Gaiman.
And then some videos explore the potential legal consequences for Amanda Palmer.
Yeah.
They talk about those terms procuring and presenting,
Right.
and analyze how those accusations could affect her defense.
Those videos are really helpful, especially for people who might not understand all the legal jargon.
Right.
They break it down so it's easier to follow.
And it's not just legal analysis. Some of the videos also talk about the emotional impact on Gaiman's fans.
Yeah.
A lot of the viewers are saying they feel betrayed, disillusioned.
They're struggling with it.
Yeah, trying to reconcile loving his work with these accusations against him.
It's a reminder that this case goes beyond the courts and Gaiman's career. It's about people, about trust being broken.
Yeah, and it's affecting people who felt a connection with Gaiman's work on a personal...
It's important to acknowledge the pain and confusion that a lot of fans are going through.
Yeah, they're trying to figure out how to separate the art from the artist.
Right.
And whether they can even enjoy Gaiman's work anymore, knowing about all of this.
Which brings up the whole death of the author concept.
Right.
This idea that art should be judged on its own, separate from the creator's life and intentions.
Complicated.
It's a really complex and controversial idea.
Yeah.
But it's super relevant in a situation like this.
Totally. It's a debate that's been going on forever.
Yeah.
Can we really separate the art from the artist, or will it always be tainted by their actions and beliefs?
There's no easy answer. It's up to each person to decide how they want to approach art created by someone who's been accused of doing bad things.
And that's what makes all of this so interesting. It's not just about legal battles or professional fallout. It's about how we relate to art, to fandom, to the creators who inspire us.
Yeah.
It's about navigating these tough moral dilemmas and making hard choices about how to deal with loving a story but being uncomfortable with the person who created it.
It's about facing this uncomfortable truth that sometimes the people we admire can do terrible things.
Yeah, and it's also about recognizing that even though there are these complexities, they don't erase the power of art, but they do add another layer. They challenge us to think critically about the stories we're consuming and the creators we're supporting. Okay, so we've really gotten into the details of the accusations against Neil, the legal stuff, the media coverage, the impact on his career, his fan. But now I think it's time to zoom out a little, look at the bigger picture.
Yeah, this isn't just about one author, right?
No, it's not.
The Gaiman case is like this little window into these huge issues that are happening in the creative world and even beyond.
Right, we're talking about power, who's accountable, and how we as a society handle these allegations in a post-#MeToo world.
Absolutely.
And I think for a lot of us, the #MeToo movement was a real turning point.
Yeah.
It changed the conversation. Survivors felt empowered to speak out. Institutions had to start looking at their own role in letting abuse happen.
Right, and the creative industries, with all those hierarchies and freelance work, they've been especially vulnerable.
Yeah.
We've seen it over and over again. Powerful people using their position to exploit others.
Yeah, and for way too long, there was this silence, this fear of stocking up because the consequences for the person making the accusations could be huge.
Exactly, your career could be over.
And that's why the Gaiman case, regardless of how it turns out legally, is so important.
Yeah.
It's a high-profile example of how these power dynamics work and how accusations, even when they're denied, can really damage someone's career.
And it's not just about what happens to individuals, it's about the potential for real change.
Right.
Like, how does the publishing industry deal with these allegations? How do they protect people? How do they make it a safer environment for everyone?
It feels like a huge task, especially in an industry that doesn't always like to change, where the people in power might not want to give up control.
It's a big challenge for sure, but I think there are some positive things happening.
Yeah.
There's more awareness now. People are realizing that we need more transparency, more accountability, and we're seeing more diverse voices in positions of power. Huge.
Yeah, that's crucial.
It's crucial for challenging the old ways of doing things and making things more inclusive.
And there's more emphasis on consent and respect in the workplace, things like intimacy coordinators on movie sets.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
becoming more common.
And it's not just about changing rules or starting new initiatives. It's about a real change in the culture.
Right.
Moving away from that old boys club mentality that protected abusers and silenced victims for so long.
So it's not just on the publishing industry, it's on all of us, the readers, the viewers, the consumers.
Yeah.
We need to be more active, demand change, support those who are fighting for a safer, fairer, creative world.
Absolutely. We have to be informed, have these conversations, hold those in power accountable.
Great.
Whether it's through what we buy, what we post on social media, or supporting organizations pushing for change.
We all have a role to play.
Yeah, we all have a part in shaping how these industries evolve.
And speaking of shaping things, the Gaiman case has also brought up these questions about legacy. Like, how do we deal with an artist's work when we hear these disturbing allegations?
Right. That's something a lot of the YouTube videos we watched talked about.
Yeah.
It's that classic question, can you separate the art from the artist?
Could you still enjoy Gaiman's book, knowing what we know now?
Yeah. Is it possible to separate the creation from the creator and find something good in it, even though there might be darkness behind?
And there's no easy answer.
No, there isn't.
It's a personal choice everyone has to make for themselves.
Yeah.
Some people might never be able to read Gaiman again.
Yeah.
Others might still find comfort or escape in his stories.
Right. It's their choice.
And we have to respect those individual decisions. No judgment.
Absolutely. It's complicated, and there's room for all sorts of responses.
And this complexity carries over into how the publishing industry will be affected.
Right.
Will this lead to authors being scrutinized more, stricter contract, changes in how NDAs are used?
Hard to say for sure, but I think it's clear this case has shaken things up. It's forced publishers, agents, editors to really look at what they're doing and figure out how to make things more ethical and transparent.
And hopefully will encourage people who've experienced abuse or harassment to come forward,
That'd be great.
knowing that they're more likely to be heard and taken seriously.
That's what we want, right? A culture where accountability is just how things are done.
Yeah.
And we're not there yet. But I think the Gaiman case, even though it's tough to deal with, could be what pushes things in the right direction.
So wrapping up this deep dive,
Whoa.
I think the takeaway is this isn't just about Neil Gaiman. It's about power. It's about being responsible. It's about the fight for a world that's more just and fair in the creative world and everywhere else.
Exactly. And it's a story that's not finished yet.
Right. It's still unfolding.
And it's a story we all have a part in writing.
Yeah, the choices we make,
The conversations we have, the things we do,
They all matter.
they all shape the future of art and creativity and help create a world where everyone can feel safe, respected, and empowered.